Hello, welcome to our presentation. This for our model application. We are doing optimizing the travel costs for the SFU's football team. My name is Krista White, and I'm also doing it with Jill Falvey and Joe Wojciechowski. So here's a brief outline for today. First, we'll discuss the application description, the setting, the background, and then proposed model description, data, the model output analysis, and then our conclusions. So for background, all of us are actually recent graduates of St. Francis University for undergrad, and we also all competed in sports during our time there. I participated in volleyball, so did Joe, and then Jill participated in women's basketball. And so for our project, we were really interested in learning how to maximize or minimize cost when it comes to traveling. And all of us, we understand that a lot goes into athletics, and I think even more post-graduation realize how much goes into trying to figure out what can be added to, what can be eliminated during a travel trip to really cut down on cost for the team and for the school. And with that, so we created an optimization model for the expenses associated just with the transport part of a travel trip. Due to the size of the SFU's football team, that's why we chose to analyze their cost. Definitely gives us a larger population and pool to pull from, and therefore, probably getting better data from it. And also within the background of this, we also wanted to look at the farthest travel trip that we have as teams. And so in the Northeastern Conference, the farthest trip we make is to Bryant University, which is located in Smithfield, Rhode Island. And so everything associated with the cost just for the travel portion of it. So either looking at it from busing or through using vans, that's what was included when looking at the mileage to Bryant University. For our proposed model description, we decided to use the Excel add-in solver. A linear programming model was created for optimizing. So for our inputs for that, our decision variables were using either buses or vans. The objective function was the total cost of the rentals. The constraints that we had were the number of football players and the number of adults required to be in each vehicle, and also having to use the integer function for a whole number. And our non-negative assumptions, the decision variables cannot be negative.
Next, we're going to look at the data that we compiled for our project. Our data was collected from the internet mostly. As you see on the left side of your screen there, we calculated the total amount of miles it would take to get from Loretto, the campus for St. Francis, up to North Smithfield, Rhode Island, the campus for Bryant University. We also looked on Enterprise's website to get a price for the 15-passenger van. And then in the middle, we looked at Ford's website for the van to get the proper gas mileage and the estimated fuel cost to travel the 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles comes from the approximate 480 miles it takes to get from St. Francis to Bryant and back, plus the intermediate travel in between once they're up at the contest. We then calculated the cost of the Fullington buses. They're usually 15-passenger buses that the school gets. We actually asked the women's volleyball coach here on campus, who estimated that the average cost per trip using the bus was $2,000. This is certainly a little bit more money than the estimated $460 that it would take for a 3-day rental of one van. We next looked at the number of people that would be traveling with the team. Although the total roster for St. Francis football is 106 players, only 85 will be traveling to this contest, we estimated. We also have 5 football coaches and 2 athletic trainers traveling with them for a total of 92 total passengers. Additionally, we made the assumption that one of the 5 coaches or 2 trainers would be driving the vans that were rented. This is a visual of the Excel spreadsheet we had set up before actually running the solver. As you can see, the bus being compared to the van here and the constraints as well.
So this next visual is showing us when we ran the solver that it is actually cheaper to rent 7 vans as opposed to any buses. and this came out to a total cost of $3,200 about. The number of coaches and trainers constraint is binding as this result. This means that all coaches and trainers would have to be driving a van to and from the athletic contests. And seats for the football passengers totaled 105, giving them an additional 20 seats. And that would be about 2 to 3 free seats per van. So we just thought of some other things that the university and coaching staff might have to consider if they did end up going with the van option instead of the two buses. So the bus drivers typically have an hour limit of how much they can drive per day. Obviously, I don't know what the NCAA rule is, but the coaches would probably have an hour limit as well. So we would have to figure that out. That would be a variable that the coaches would have to work out. Another one is if the coaches are liable if something were to happen while they were driving. So if that means through insurance, if they were to get into an accident, would the coach be liable or would that be on the school? And also if someone was to get injured in the accident, how they would go about that since you're not going through a bus company and you don't have a bus driver. And then another question that we raised is, should the coaches be compensated for driving? During on-bus rides, coaches actually typically get a lot of work done while they're on the buses since a lot of these trips can be very long. So if they're driving that whole time, that's time that they can't be doing other work. So we posed the question if they'd be compensated for driving as well.
Building off of these other variables, obviously our model was very basic in form, and there is a lot more costs that do go into the transportation cost of either using a bus or a van. But with our model, I think it's still, despite that, those limitations, I think it still does show and prove that can be some costs can be cut by using vans over buses. So knowing all of this, in conclusion, the cost was minimized when there was 7 15-passenger vans, the total cost being $3,220. It was cheaper to use staff members as versus using bus drivers. Reflecting more on these results, although the material costs have been minimized, the physical costs have been maximized. It would definitely cut a lot of costs for our athletic programs by using staff members as drivers, but you have to take into account the physical taxation of driving those long hours, especially when already their job, a lot of sporting events, very emotional, very high intensity, and so having that match with a 7.5 hour bus or van driving would not be a safe bet, I think, for the physical health of a lot of our coaches and or athletic trainers. Additionally, we'd also have to take into account all the space needed to carry equipment, especially considering a football team. I mean, in a bus, you have the nice under part to be able to house everything that equipment needs of the football team, gear, medical equipment, all of that. But in the vans, they would definitely have the trunk space, but yeah, we didn't even take into consideration kind of would they have to have bags on top of them and how actually comfortable would it be riding in a van, especially considering that a lot of Division I football players are larger in height and also stature, and just wanting it to be not only an enjoyable trip for the coaches but also for the athletes. So with all this information, our group's recommendation would definitely be for the school not to proceed with using the vans over the buses, just because although there might be more material gain in using the vans, in reality, it would be just a very uncomfortable trip, I think, for a lot of the football team as well as the coaches. I think the strain put on the coaches to be able to drive and drive well and keep their athletes safe. Plus, also, you never know, just the concern of the liability for coaches driving. That wouldn't be good for the coaches, for the program, for the school. So Just because cost might be minimized materially doesn't mean that physically they always are. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation and just for the opportunity to take your course.